I'm Grace's main spirit guide. Tonight, we're going to try an experimenting journey. I'm dreaming of an art world where art is used as a transformative tool. It isn't dogmatic, it isn't didactic, it isn't cliche, it's beautiful, it's inventive, it pushes, both the body, the mind, the soul. My name's Grace Ndiritu. I'm a visual artist and filmmaker. I would describe my art as a unique mix of politics and activism. This is because I grew up with an activist mother in a political household, and also I have a deep esoteric spiritual practice from a young age. I didn't really grow up going to museums. Our household was always very focused on humanitarianism and meeting different types of people from different cultures. In my bedroom, I had pictures from Vogue, fashion pictures, but I also had pictures of the Dalai Lama and Tibetan monks on my bedroom wall as a teenager. So, I had a wide range of interests. My first study was textile art in England, and then I went to art school in Amsterdam. I did a postgrad there. And I had amazing teachers like Steve McQueen, Marlene Dumas, Stan Douglas, Tacita Dean. And they're the ones that showed me basically what it meant to be an artist and a filmmaker. At that time, I'd already started doing a lot of esoteric practices. I had a guru, had been on long meditation retreats, and I already started to mix those two kind of languages together in my own artwork. So in my early videos, I'd put myself in front of the camera and I'd put myself in different states of mind, like a trance, and then I'd perform. And then I would look at what I'd done. I see a connection between this time of living now, in the time of crisis, and making art. So art can offer a safe space in a time of crisis. I think it's really important, that certain spaces in cities are preserved, like the library, like the park, like the church, like the museum. Spaces of contemplation, spaces where silence can be found, spaces where different ideas that aren't normally thought about can be exchanged. In 2012, I really believed that museums were dying, because they really just felt so disconnected with the reality of life outside of the museum. I remember I kept on going to the same shows, and it just didn't seem that the themes at that time reflected anything, one, I was interested in, but also that actually were going on in the news. It just didn't make any sense. So I felt that museums weren't actually fulfilling their purpose, which is actually, to be a safe space, for people to come and to think about life in a different way. It was more like fantastical or escapism than actually connecting and seeing what people need. And I really felt like museums had forgotten about the general public. And so for me, the only way to deal with it was this idea of bringing non-rational methodologies into the museum. So that's by bringing new energies through things like shamanism, yoga, meditation, but also different ways of working with collections and thinking about how we work with objects and the kind of infrastructures within a museum. I came up with this idea of healing the museum and this idea of institutional critique. For example, at SMAC, I've been here doing a 1-year residency where I've been working with the staff, behind the scenes, with the objects and with the public. obviously working in the collections, I've had access to all the different storage sites, and I've been thinking about what's missing, because the SMAC is a museum that was built in the 20th century, so it's mostly white male collection. So I've been looking and seeing what is there and what's interesting or what's hidden or what's missing. I felt like SMAC, as a typical Western museum, had ignored certain themes in its history. So I was very interested in looking at blackness, indigenous, community, spirituality, ecology, and thinking about those themes in my show. These questions about what is necessary to have a museum, are museums necessary now? What's the point of collections? Are really important, because I see healing as a form of institutional critique. For example, I did a performance in the African Museum in Brussels where I got people to sit in the gem and mineral room. So this is a room full of gems that have been stolen from the Congo. So it's, they're like blood diamonds. And so we sat in a circle and we meditated in that room together. This was the first time as well where a director of that museum, who had been there like nearly 20 years, he actually sat on the floor of his own museum. And what happened is that it brought us together closer as a group, because then afterwards we'd have to have workshops about, the legal frameworks about sending objects back and stuff. And because we went through this process together, it made the other discussions much more potent and powerful. The exhibition at the Photography Museum in Antwerp is actually one of my favourite exhibitions I've ever done. This idea of reimagining the Photography Museum collection, it started from their acquisition of my own work called A Quest for Meaning. So A Quest for Meaning is a photographic encyclopedic project I started in 2010. Where I invented an encyclopedia with many different categories like textiles, natural elements, trees, etc., that had come out of this idea of a shamanic journey I had gone on. So I came up with this idea of trying to depict everything from the Big Bang until now, which is obviously a poetic idea. It's an impossible thing to do, but I love the idea of mixing different geographies and histories together in my encyclopedia. And the thing is about encyclopedias, usually they're very rational and they're all about categorising, but my encyclopedia had come from this spiritual experience, and that was important for me. So when I started to work at the Photography Museum in Antwerp, I've tried to think about how we can re-experience photography and kind of re-energise not only the collection, but our actual ways of experiencing and viewing collections within a museum. For my show, the scenography is really important. So it's about getting audiences to slow down, basically, and to be with art in a new way. First of all, I'm asking them to take their shoes off, which is already a big step for some people. But the idea is by doing that tiny little step, you become a part of the experience. You're already starting and integrating into this idea of transformation. So you cross a threshold. But I've also invented and written some of these audio guides that were less art historical, but that offer specific audio meditations. And this actually really does change the way that people see and experience the artworks. And so you're using the museum in a way that you wouldn't normally do. So you're seeing and you're having a transformative experience between you and the artwork, and also the other people in the space who are also doing the same thing. I invite you to imagine the Photo Museum collection with me, keeping an open mind, making intuitive connections, and abandoning rational thought processes. Now, take a comfortable seat and close your eyes. We'll connect with our breath before turning our attention inwards. Focus on the natural breath, coming in and coming out. Do not change the breath. Let it come in and come out. I always felt very guilty being in art school. I always felt like I should be in the real world, I should be in Palestine protesting or, doing something real, helping people. And what am I doing in this art school where people are just like messing about? I like this idea of what the Dalai Lama talks about when he talks about socially benefiting activities. And this is something that I learned from him when I was 18, 19, when I went to India to listen to his teaching. So when he talked about this idea of socially benefiting activities, I thought about how my art could be part of that. But then the challenge would be, like I say, to not make it dogmatic or cliche and stuff. For me, it's really important to think of art as a transformative medium. I'm always thinking about the two brain hemispheres of the left and the right, the rational, let's say, and the more creative. And so I always try to bring those aspects into my work. So when thinking about solutions or thinking about how to think creatively about today's world's problems.
Mic is good there for you?
Yeah, a bit higher. Okay, awesome.
Sounds good?
Black Beauty is my first short film. I call it a film rather than a video because I worked with a film crew, I wrote a script, I worked with actors for the first time. And it's a film about climate change and migration that feature an African supermodel. She's doing a beauty advert for a cream called Black Beauty.
Remember, you're not just selling a product, you're selling a lifestyle. Do it again from the top.
In this time of crisis, Black Beauty is the only cream you'll ever need. Factor 5000, heat and wind resistant. Within 24 hours, it acclimatizes to your skin, keeping you and your jeans staying healthy and looking good. Come rain or shine, saving Earth is now officially sexy.
Say it again.
Sexy, 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 sexy.
She goes into a kind of shamanic visionary state where she ends up being a TV host called Karen Roberts, and she's interviewing the Argentinian modernist writer Jorge Luis Borges.
Welcome to Talk of the Town. I'm Karen Roberts, and for those of you who have watched this program before.
I conceived this idea after many years of going, to Argentina, but also by researching, I'd understood that the first people who had actually settled in Patagonia, 50,000 years ago, had actually come from East Africa. And I was obsessed with that idea. And I was working with geneticists and anthropologists and climate scientists. And I was asking this question of what Patagonia is going to be like in 1,000 years. And so between the two of them, they have many surreal conversations about politics, but also about ecological questions.
For Argentina, it's a new conversation.
And as a writer, can you speculate what you think Patagonia will be like in 1,000 years?
It's very difficult because we don't know what will happen with our technologies. So much can happen in the next century. So it's really very difficult to see in advance. But one question that no one is asking is, can we have another ice age?
In my performance practice, I work a lot around using shamanism and meditation to think of new ways to look at things. The performance called Labour, Birth of a New Museum featured a group of pregnant women in their second and third trimester who are invited to go on this shamanic journey. No plant medicine is used at all, no psychoactive drugs are used. I've done shamanic journeys with all sorts of people, like refugees, migrants, doctors, yoga teachers, the general public. Normally people who think they're quite rational. But also in this specific performance, I'm really interested in this idea of working with the unborn art audience. I'm going on a journey to the lower world to ask my spirit guide to tell me the soul name of my unborn child. The women all lie down and then they're taken on a journey using the trance drumming. And they begin to see things, all different types of things. Mostly they try to connect with their spirit guides who show them information about themselves, information it would be very hard to get in a rational way. So things from their childhood or information to do with their pregnancy or to do with their creativity. And what's really fascinating is that because I'm also in a trance state and I'm drumming over them and near them, I'm seeing information about them and about their unborn babies. And so afterwards, when we sit and we discuss what happened, usually the two points of view are aligned and actually really correspond. So the reason I want to do this performance called Labour, Birth of a New Museum, is because it's really important to think about the next generations, especially when you're thinking about museums, you know, thinking who's going to come to the museum. And so by bringing the mothers here and having them have this experience with the unborn babies, the idea is that after the babies are born, they will bring them back to the museum and they will say, look, this is where I met you before you were born, you know, and that they have this very bonding experience. And so it's this idea of like birthing a new museum. You know, you're doing it energetically and visually and artistically. And I find that very fascinating because it really goes with my ideas of healing the museum and this idea of institutional critique and on how artists can change society. Not only politically, socially, economically, but also energetically. So to me, that's the beauty of art, you know, when you can have something very esoteric and very non-rational, let's say, and performative, and then it can become actually something practical. So I like that idea. I'm always dreaming of art that can do that.